everybody, how's it going? This is going to be a third times the charm. That's the title of this video. And what I want to do is I want to show 5 bands who didn't really hit their stride, either creatively or commercially, until their third album. Now, the first artist I'm going to show is INXS. This is their first self-titled album, and it's very primitive in terms of new wave. It sounds, there are just slightly hints of what would be to come. They're just still crafting the INXS sound on here. Even the title of the songs, you can't imagine appearing on a later period INXS album, like On a Bus, Roller Skating, Wishy Washy. So the potential is there. It's just not a fully realized INXS album. Still enjoyable to listen to for what it is. It was released in 1980. Close but no cigar. Then we have their second album, which is a little closer. We're moving in that direction, Underneath the Colors, which is a really enjoyable album. It's a little moodier than their first album. You got Stay Young, which opens up, which still not quite fully developed in terms of the INXS sound, but there's some great tracks on here. Night of Rebellion is great. Barbarian is very cool. The title track, they're moving a little closer in the direction, the INXS that we would be more familiar with. And I would say this is much improved on the debut album. But, of course, as we all know, their third album is where they struck gold, INXS Shabooh Shoobah. And this is light years ahead of those first 2 albums. The one thing was a song that got big radio play and also was on heavy rotation on MTV. We have Don't Change, which is the other hit, but some of the deeper tracks are really cool as well. I love Spy of Love, kind of the exotic flavor of that song. You have some harder rock with songs like Here Comes. I love Golden Playpen, just so many cool tracks on here. Not a dud. Whereas you couldn't say that about the first 2 albums. There were at least 1 or 2 weak tracks on those first 2. This is solid from start to finish. Okay, the next artist I'm going to show is Def Leppard. This is their first album, On Through the Night. As close to heavy metal as they ever got. Not to say that their later work wasn't heavy metal, but this is pure heavy metal, not trying to sound commercial. Rock Brigade, Hello America, what a way to come out swinging. And this is not to say this is a weak album. It's just not the Def Leppard that would gain them a huge audience, airplay on MTV. But On Through the Night is still a solid record. And of course, they improved on it, at least in my opinion, with High and Dry. Now, getting a little closer to that Def Leppard formula, still very much in the heavy metal vein. However, not too much in the way of ear candy, not a lot of real solid radio hits. The closest that you got on here is Bring It On the Heartache, but the rest of the album, to me, you can understand why it wasn't quite the breakthrough album. Some great tracks on here, just not very radio friendly with the exception of the song I just mentioned. But still, again, a solid heavy metal album. And then the breakthrough, of course, Pyromania, chock full of hits. There were at least 4 songs on here that showed up on MTV. Def Leppard was the biggest band. When I was in middle school, Def Leppard was the biggest band there was. Everybody who was cool loved Def Leppard. I'm not even going to list the tracks on here because you already know. And again, whereas the first 2 albums, you could say there might have been a weak song here or there, but on Pyromania, it is solid. Even the songs that didn't make the radio, that weren't released as singles, had radio potential, had commercial potential, but I don't consider it to be a sellout. Solid record, and one that I just have such nostalgia for. Okay, I'm going to dip into some progressive rock here with Yes, and their first album, which was released, I believe it was 1968, if I'm not mistaken, 68 or 69. And there's not too many elements of progressive rock on these first 2 Yes albums. Yeah, there are some solid songs, but Just sounds like late 60s art rock. You have Yesterday and Today, which is a cool song. Looking Around. You know, the best of the songs from these first two albums you can find on a compilation. It's called Yesterdays, which I think was released in the late 70s. And it kind of takes the best tracks from these first two Yes albums. Looking Around was on there. They do a cover of the Beatles' Every Little Thing. Survival, if I'm not mistaken, is also on Yesterdays. But yeah, it's concise, late 60s, nice pop, art rock, whatever you want to call it. Not quite progressive rock, though. I don't have their second album on vinyl, but I do have it on CD. Time and a Word, which again is moving a little closer to the mark, but not quite the Yes that we would be accustomed to. Sweet Dreams is on that Yesterday's album. They do a cover of a Richie Havens song, No Opportunity Necessary, No Experience Needed. Time and a Word, the title track, also appears on that Yesterday's album, but an enjoyable Yes album, but nowhere near what we would get with, of course, their first masterpiece, the Yes album. Solid all the way through. The leap from this to this is really remarkable, and I would have said the same thing about the INXS, their second album, to their third one. But the Yes album, and many people, this is how big this album was and how much it established Yes's reputation. Many people think that this was Yes's debut album. It doesn't help that it's titled the Yes album, but still, I love this. My favorite Yes song of all time is on here, Starship Trooper, which I think they played live every single concert since this album came out. Seen All Good People was a huge radio hit as well. Yours Is No Disgrace is a masterpiece. Perpetual Change is excellent. Yes was on fire. This album and the next two are as good as progressive rock got. Okay, next, The Clash. And yeah, this was a big influential punk album for sure. And you do have I'm So Bored with the USA on here. White Riot is great. Career Opportunity. So it's a solid debut album. This is as straightforward punk rock as The Clash would ever release. Some people think of them as a punk band, but I would argue they're really only a punk band their first two albums. This is their second album. Give them enough rope, and I don't think it's quite as impressive as their debut album, whereas the artist that I mentioned before, there was kind of a progression, and I'm not saying this record is bad. It's just in terms of the Clash's catalog, I would probably, and I'm not even going to go there with the Cut the Crap album, but I would say in terms of the Clash's first five albums, their classic period, this would probably rank at the bottom for me. It's cool, it's punk, it's just not really the Clash that I know and love. And it was their third album where the magic really happened. A double album with not a weak track. There's not many double albums that you can really say that about, honestly. But you got London Calling on here. You have Brand New Cadillac, which is a bit of rockabilly. So many different styles that the Clash explore on this record. Wrong on Boyo. I love the dub of the Guns of Brixton. Clampdown is great. The hit that wasn't even listed on the album, Train in Vain. Spanish Bombs is great. Death or Glory. Every single song on here is phenomenal. What a great album. And the Clash's breakthrough. The next band and the last band that I'm going to show is The Who. This is their first album in the U.S. The Who sings My Generation, and it was just called My Generation in the UK. And Pete Townshend didn't start off as a great songwriter, a passable songwriter. You can tell he's still kind of finding his way on some of these early songs, but you have the standout, The Kids Are All Right, My Generation. There's some R&B covers on here, a James Brown cover, and the rest of it, it's not terrible. It's just nothing spectacular. But you have kind of that mod rock sound here. Not too altogether different from the music that bands like the Small Faces were putting out. And then their second album, Happy Jack in the US, in the UK, as it was originally intended, called A Quick One. And for the first time, you've got The Who expanding, boldly going where no band had gone before with a mini rock opera, A Quick One while he's away. Now, the thing with this album is that for whatever reason, I think it was because Kit Lambert talked them into, if you each write a song, each write 2 songs, the royalties will come pouring in. So it really kind of suffers because Pete Townshend is not writing all the songs here. You've got 2 mediocre songs from Roger Daltrey, 2 mediocre compositions from Keith Moon. John Entwistle's songs at least kind of point in the direction that he would go. He was obviously the other principal songwriter in The Who, although never as prolific as Pete Townshend was. But you do have his classic track, Boris the Spider, on here. And the rest of it is just kind of pedestrian R&B. Nothing offensive, nothing terrible about it, but nothing to write home about necessarily either. They are moving in that classic Who direction. And then we would get what I argue is the first Who masterpiece. I love this. It is a spoof on pirate radio, The Who Sell Out. I also see it kind of as a comedy album. Now, the advertisements that they do on here, they're for actual products, but they do them in The Who's own inimitable style. And it really is, in a lot of places, kind of a tongue-in-cheek album. But you do have I Can See for Miles, one of the greatest Who songs ever. Marianne with the Shaky Hand. I love the song O to Rono on here. There's the mini rock opera Rael. But what a fun record this is. I love it. I love everything about it. The album packaging, and it's just a solid album from 1967. But this is where The Who really caught fire, and obviously their next album would be Tommy, which would catapult them into superstardom. All right, so let me know, what is your list? Do you have any artists that I didn't name on here that fit into this category? Hope you enjoy the video, and take care.